Sarah Martinez had learned to keep her sleeves rolled down. It was easier that way. Easier than dealing with the stares, the whispers, and the assumptions people made when they caught a glimpse of the intricate tattoo that covered her right forearm. The black ink told a story that most people weren't ready to hear, especially not in the quiet suburban town of Millbrook, where she now worked as a high school history teacher. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jefferson High School as Sarah arranged her lesson plans for the day. Veterans Day was approaching, and she had planned a special unit about military service and sacrifice. The irony wasn't lost on her that she would be teaching about heroes while hiding her own story beneath long sleeves and careful silence. "Miss Martinez, are you ready for the assembly?" Principal Davidson knocked on her classroom door, his friendly smile masking the underlying tension that had been building since the school board meeting last week. Some parents had raised concerns about Sarah's unprofessional appearance after catching a glimpse of her tattoo during a parent-teacher conference. "Yes, everything's prepared," Sarah replied, smoothing down her conservative blouse. She had chosen her outfit carefully. Long sleeves, high neckline, nothing that would give anyone reason to complain. It was a far cry from the person she used to be, but those days felt like a lifetime ago. The assembly hall buzzed with excitement as students filed in for the Veterans Day presentation. Local veterans had been invited to speak about their service, and Sarah watched from the back as retired Army Sergeant Tom Williams adjusted his dress blues at the podium. His medals caught the light, each one representing a story of courage and sacrifice. "Today we honor those who served," Sergeant Williams began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned every word he spoke. "But service isn't always recognized. Sometimes the greatest heroes walk among us unnoticed, their stories untold." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She thought about the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve. Not some random design chosen on a whim, but a memorial that held more meaning than anyone in this room could understand. The intricate anchor, eagle, and trident weren't just decorative elements. They were symbols of a life she had been forced to leave behind, an identity she had to bury in order to survive in this new world. As the assembly continued, Sarah noticed 17-year-old Marcus Thompson slouching in the third row. His eyes glazed with the kind of boredom that came from feeling disconnected from everything around him. Marcus had been struggling lately, his grades slipping, his attitude growing more defiant by the day. His father had been deployed overseas for the past 8 months, and the stress was showing in everything Marcus did. After the veterans finished their presentations, students began filing out of the assembly hall. Sarah was gathering her materials when she heard the snickering behind her. 3 senior boys had cornered Marcus near the back exit, their voices low but their intent clear. "Your dad's probably never coming back," Jake Morrison whispered, his words designed to cut deep. "My mom says most of them don't make it home the same, if they make it home at all." Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. She had seen that look before, in mirrors and in the faces of countless others who had lost people they loved to war. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "That's enough," Sarah said firmly, her teacher voice cutting through the boys' cruel laughter. "You need to get to class. Now!" Jake Morrison turned toward her, his smirk faltering only slightly. "Come on, Miss Martinez. We're just having a conversation. Maybe you should worry about covering up those trashy tattoos instead of butting into student business." The comment hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with worse than teenage bullies, though their words still stung. "My classroom, 5 minutes. All of you." As the boys shuffled away, Sarah placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. The young man was fighting back tears, his whole body trembling with anger and grief. She knew that feeling intimately, the rage that came from watching people trivialize something sacred, something that cost everything. Don't let them get to you, Sarah said quietly. Your father's service matters. His sacrifice matters. And he's coming home. Marcus looked up at her with surprise. Most teachers offered empty platitudes or sent him to the counselor. But something in Sarah's voice carried a weight of authority that he hadn't expected. How do you know? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah glanced around the empty hallway, then made a decision that went against every careful boundary she had established. She rolled up her right sleeve just enough to reveal the edge of her tattoo, the tip of an anchor surrounded by intricate detail work that spoke of military precision. Because I know what it means to serve, she said simply, then pulled her sleeve back down. And I know what it means to come home. Marcus stared at her with new understanding, but before either of them could say more, Principal Davidson appeared in the hallway, his expression stern. Miss Martinez, I need to speak with you privately, he said, his tone suggesting this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Sarah followed Principal Davidson to his office, her heart sinking as she noticed the three parents waiting inside. She recognized them immediately, the same group that had been vocal at recent school board meetings about maintaining appropriate standards at Jefferson High. Please, sit down, Principal Davidson said, settling behind his desk with the weary expression of someone caught between competing pressures. We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your conduct and appearance. Mrs. Morrison, Jake's mother, leaned forward in her chair. She was a sharp-faced woman who had never missed an opportunity to voice her opinions about how the school should be run. My son came home very upset yesterday. He said you displayed inappropriate body art during class time. I rolled up my sleeve to point at the board, Sarah replied carefully, sticking to the truth while omitting the crucial details about her conversation with Marcus. If that constitutes displaying inappropriate body art, then perhaps we need to reconsider the dress code policy. Don't be flippant, snapped Mr. Peterson, whose daughter was in Sarah's third period class. We've all heard the rumors about your background. Whatever you did before coming here, this is a place of learning. We expect our teachers to set proper examples. Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she kept her voice level. I've been teaching here for 2 years. My students consistently score above district averages on standardized tests. I've received excellent evaluations from administration. What exactly is the problem with my performance? It's not about performance, Mrs. Morrison said with barely concealed disdain. It's about character. It's about the kind of influence we want our children exposed to. Tattoos like that suggest a certain kind of person, a certain kind of past. Principal Davidson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah could see that he was torn between supporting a good teacher and appeasing vocal parents who had political connections in the community. Perhaps we could discuss a compromise, he suggested carefully. Long sleeves at all times during school hours, full coverage, no exceptions. I already wear long sleeves, Sarah pointed out, her patience beginning to wear thin. This entire conversation is based on a glimpse of my forearm during normal classroom activities. A glimpse was enough, Mrs. Morrison said coldly. These children are impressionable. They don't need to see evidence of poor life choices. The words hung in the air like poison, and Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Poor life choices. If they only knew what those poor life choices had cost her. If they only knew the nightmares that still woke her up in cold sweats, the friends who hadn't made it home, the life she had built and lost in service to the very freedom that allowed these people to sit in comfortable offices and pass judgment. I need to think about this, Sarah said finally, standing up from her chair with as much dignity as she could manage. If there's nothing else, I have classes to prepare for. As she walked back to her classroom, Sarah felt the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation that stopped when she passed. The hallways of Jefferson High suddenly felt like enemy territory, and she was completely alone behind enemy lines. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her empty classroom long after the final bell had rung. The Veterans Day lesson plans spread across her desk seemed to mock her now. How could she teach about military service and sacrifice when she wasn't allowed to acknowledge her own? How could she inspire students to respect those who served when she was being punished for having served herself? A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus Thompson stood in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his expression uncertain. "Miss Martinez? Can I talk to you?" Sarah gestured for him to come in, grateful for any distraction from her spiraling thoughts. Marcus closed the door behind him and approached her desk with the careful movements of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for earlier, for standing up to Jake and his friends." "You don't need to thank me for that," Sarah replied. "What they said was wrong. Your father is serving his country, and that deserves respect, not ridicule." Marcus nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "That tattoo you showed me, it's military, isn't it? I've seen similar ones in pictures my dad sent me." Sarah looked at the young man carefully. He was just 17, but his eyes held a maturity that came from worry and loss. She could see his father in his face, could recognize the particular kind of strength that military families developed out of necessity. "Yes," she said simply. "It is." "Were you deployed?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah considered her answer carefully. She had spent 2 years avoiding this exact conversation, building walls between her past and present selves. But looking at Marcus, seeing the desperate need for understanding in his eyes, those walls began to crumble. "3 tours," she said quietly. "Afghanistan, 2018 to 2021. Marcus's eyes widened. "You were there when my dad... He's been deployed since March. You were there during some of the heaviest fighting." Sarah nodded, remembering those days with a clarity that time hadn't softened. The heat, the dust, the constant awareness that everything could change in an instant. The brotherhood and sisterhood that formed in those conditions, bonds stronger than anything civilian life could offer. "It's hard," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. "Not knowing, waiting. Everyone here acts like it's no big deal, like he's just away on a business trip. But I see the news. I know what's happening over there." Sarah stood up and walked around her desk, sitting on the edge so she was closer to Marcus's level. "Your father chose to serve. That choice, that sacrifice, it matters. It matters more than the opinions of people who have never had to make that kind of decision." "But what if something happens to him?" Marcus asked, the question that had been eating him alive finally spoken aloud. Sarah looked at this young man who was carrying a burden far too heavy for his 17 years, and she made another decision that went against every careful boundary she had established. "Come here," she said, rolling up her sleeve completely for the first time in 2 years. Marcus approached slowly, his eyes taking in the full extent of Sarah's tattoo. The anchor, eagle, and trident were immediately recognizable as Navy SEAL symbols, but woven throughout the design were names, dates, and coordinates that told a story of loss and remembrance. At the center of it all was a single word in elegant script: valor. "This tattoo represents 8 people," Sarah said quietly, her finger tracing the intricate details. 8 people who didn't make it home. They were my teammates, my friends, my family. I carry them with me every day." Marcus stared at the tattoo with new understanding. This wasn't some random design or rebellious statement. This was a memorial, a sacred trust, a promise to never forget. "You're a Navy SEAL," he whispered, the words carrying a weight of awe and respect. "Was," Sarah corrected gently. "I'm a high school teacher now, but yes, I was part of SEAL Team 3, and I want you to understand something, Marcus. Your father is trained by the best, equipped by the best, and surrounded by people who will move heaven and earth to bring him home safely. That's what we do. That's what military families do. We take care of our own." Tears rolled down Marcus's cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief rather than fear. Here was someone who understood, someone who had been where his father was, someone who could speak with authority about the things that kept him awake at night. "Does it get easier?" he asked. "The waiting?" Sarah considered the question honestly. "No, but you get stronger. And you learn that the waiting is part of serving too. Military families serve alongside their soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Your strength gives your father strength. Your faith in him gives him something to fight for." Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for asking," Sarah replied, rolling her sleeve back down. "But Marcus, you need to understand something. This conversation stays between us. There are people in this community who wouldn't understand, who would use this information to hurt both of us." Because of what those parents said about inappropriate tattoos and poor life choices? Sarah's jaw tightened. Some people are more comfortable with the idea of heroes than with actual heroes. They want military service to be something that happens far away, something they can support from a distance without having to confront the reality of what it costs. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new maturity. "That's not fair. You served your country. You lost friends. You should be honored, not hidden." "Life isn't always fair," Sarah said with a sad smile. "But we adapt. We overcome. We continue the mission even when the mission changes." As Marcus gathered his backpack to leave, he turned back to Sarah with determination in his eyes. "Miss Martinez, if anyone ever says anything bad about your tattoo again, about your service, they'll have to go through me first." Sarah felt her heart swell with pride and affection for this young man, who understood honor in a way that many adults never would. "I appreciate that, Marcus. But remember what I told you about being strong. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is rise above the noise and focus on what really matters." After Marcus left, Sarah sat alone in her classroom as darkness settled over Jefferson High School. The conversation with Marcus had awakened something in her that she had been trying to bury for 2 years. The pride, the sense of purpose, the unshakable knowledge that she had served something greater than herself. But it had also reminded her of the price she had paid for that service. Not just the friends she had lost overseas, but the person she had lost when she came home. The confident, capable operator who had earned her place among the elite forces had been replaced by a woman who hid her past and apologized for her presence. Tomorrow there would be another meeting with parents and administration. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to continue hiding or to stand up and claim the respect she had earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Tonight, she would remember who she used to be and decide who she wanted to become. As Sarah finally packed up her lesson plans and prepared to leave, she made a mental note to revise her Veterans Day curriculum. Her students deserved to learn about more than just historical military campaigns. They deserved to learn about the ongoing cost of freedom, about the sacrifices made by people who might be sitting right next to them in class. They deserved to learn about heroes who looked like their teachers, their neighbors, their family members. Heroes who carried their service quietly and with dignity, even when the world around them failed to recognize the depth of their sacrifice. The tattoo beneath Sarah's sleeve represented more than fallen comrades. It represented a promise to live with honor, to carry forward the values that her teammates had died for, and to never let their sacrifice be diminished by the small-minded prejudices of people who had never been tested in the crucible of war. As she walked through the empty hallways of Jefferson High School, Sarah Martinez began to remember what it felt like to be a warrior. The next morning brought an email that Sarah had been dreading. Principal Davidson requested her presence in the conference room at 7:30 a.m. before classes began. The message was formal, professional, and carried the unmistakable tone of administrative action. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, her lesson plans perfectly organized, and her sleeves buttoned at the wrists. The conference room held more people than she expected. Principal Davidson sat at the head of the table, flanked by Superintendent Collins, 2 school board members, and the same 3 parents from yesterday's meeting. At the far end of the table sat someone Sarah didn't recognize, a middle-aged woman in a business suit taking notes on a legal pad. "Miss Martinez, please have a seat," Superintendent Collins said, his voice carrying the weight of administrative authority. "I think you know why we're here." Sarah sat down carefully, keeping her hands folded in her lap. She had faced enemy combatants with less anxiety than she felt in this sterile conference room, surrounded by people who had never risked anything more dangerous than a strongly worded letter to the editor. "We've received additional complaints," Principal Davidson began, clearly uncomfortable with the proceedings. "Parents are concerned about the message being sent to our students regarding appropriate professional standards." Mrs. Morrison leaned forward aggressively. "My son came home asking questions about military tattoos and special forces operations. He's 17 years old. These are not appropriate topics for a high school history teacher to be discussing with impressionable young people." Sarah felt her temper begin to rise, but she kept her voice steady. "I teach American history. Military operations and military service are integral parts of American history. If parents don't want their children exposed to discussions about the sacrifices made by American service members, perhaps they should reconsider their choice of curriculum." The woman with the legal pad looked up sharply. "Miss Martinez, I'm Janet Wheeler from the district's legal department. We need to establish some facts here. What exactly is the nature of your military background?" Sarah hesitated. She had spent 2 years carefully avoiding this exact conversation, but cornered in this room, her options were limited. "I served in the United States Navy from 2017 to 2022, 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan." "In what capacity?" Wheeler pressed, her pen poised above her notepad. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her answer would change everything. "Naval Special Warfare, SEAL Team 3. The silence in the room was deafening. Superintendent Collins's eyebrows shot up, Principal Davidson's mouth fell open slightly, and even Mrs. Morrison seemed temporarily speechless. The woman who had been complaining about inappropriate tattoos and poor life choices was suddenly faced with the reality that she had been criticizing a Navy SEAL. "You're a Navy SEAL?" one of the school board members asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was," Sarah corrected. "I was medically discharged in 2022 following injuries sustained in combat operations." Janet Wheeler made rapid notes. "Miss Martinez, why wasn't this information included in your employment file? Military service, especially special operations experience, is typically considered an asset in educational settings." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Because I learned early in my civilian transition that people have very specific ideas about what military service looks like. Many employers see female veterans, particularly those with special operations backgrounds, as potential problems rather than assets. It was easier to focus on my educational qualifications and teaching experience." Mrs. Morrison had recovered from her initial shock and was clearly not pleased with this development. "This just proves my point. Someone with that kind of background, someone who has been trained to kill, has no business around our children." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, but before she could respond, Principal Davidson surprised everyone by speaking up firmly. "That's enough, Mrs. Morrison. Miss Martinez has served her country with honor, and she has been an exemplary teacher for 2 years. Her background explains her exceptional ability to connect with students who have military family members, and her deep knowledge of American military history. "She's been lying to us for 2 years," Mr. Peterson interjected. "Hiding her past, deceiving the community. What else has she been dishonest about?" Sarah stood up slowly, her patience finally exhausted. "I haven't lied about anything. I simply didn't volunteer information about experiences that most people aren't equipped to understand or appreciate. I earned a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and a Navy Cross. I lost 8 teammates in service to this country. I carry their memory in my heart and on my skin. And I won't apologize for honoring their sacrifice." The room fell silent again. Even Mrs. Morrison seemed to understand that she was in dangerous territory, criticizing someone whose service record spoke for itself, but her discomfort only made her more aggressive. "Those tattoos are still inappropriate for a school setting," she said stubbornly. "Whatever your service record, you need to maintain professional standards." Sarah looked around the room at these people who had never been tested, never sacrificed, never faced down death for something greater than themselves. She thought about Marcus Thompson, about the other military children in her classes who needed someone who understood their world. She thought about her fallen teammates and the promise she had made to live with honor. "My tattoo is a memorial," Sarah said quietly. "Every name, every date, every symbol represents someone who died for this country. Someone who died so that you could sit in comfortable conference rooms and debate appropriate professional standards. If honoring fallen heroes is inappropriate, then this institution has lost its way." Before anyone could respond, there was a sharp knock on the conference room door. Principal Davidson's secretary entered with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman here who insists he needs to speak with Miss Martinez immediately. He says it's a military matter." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Military matters that couldn't wait usually meant bad news. Someone was injured, someone was dead, someone needed immediate assistance. "Send him in." The man who entered the conference room was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. His civilian clothes were impeccable, but Sarah immediately recognized the way he moved, the way his eyes quickly assessed the room and identified potential threats and exits. This was someone from her world. "Miss Martinez, I'm Commander James Mitchell, Navy SEAL Team 5. I need to speak with you privately about a sensitive matter involving one of your former teammates." The effect of his words on the room was immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, the people who had been questioning Sarah's fitness to teach were faced with an active-duty Navy SEAL commander treating her as a respected colleague. The dynamic in the room shifted completely. "Commander, these are school administrators and parents," Sarah said carefully. "We're in the middle of a personnel meeting. Can this wait?" Commander Mitchell's eyes swept the room, taking in the tense atmosphere and the legal notepad filled with Janet Wheeler's observations. His expression darkened slightly as he processed the situation. "Actually, Miss Martinez, I think this might be relevant to your current discussion. I'm here because we've received intelligence about a credible threat against several former SEAL operators and their families. Your name is on the list of potential targets." The blood drained from Mrs. Morrison's face. Superintendent Collins leaned forward urgently. "What kind of threat, Commander?" "The details are classified, but I can tell you that Miss Martinez's combat record makes her a high-value target for certain extremist groups. We're implementing additional security protocols for all personnel on the list." Commander Mitchell turned to Sarah with genuine concern. "How secure is your current living situation? Do you have reliable transportation? Are you taking appropriate precautions?" Sarah felt the surreal nature of the situation wash over her. 10 minutes ago, these people had been questioning her fitness to teach high school students. Now they were learning that her military service had made her a target for international terrorists. "I live in a secure apartment complex with controlled access," Sarah replied professionally. I maintain situational awareness and follow basic security protocols. But Commander, why are you delivering this information in person? This could have been handled through official channels. Commander Mitchell glanced around the room again, his expression suggesting he was choosing his words carefully. Because, Miss Martinez, we've also received word about your transition difficulties. The Navy takes care of its own, and we've heard that you're not receiving the support you deserve in your civilian career. The implication was clear, and everyone in the room understood it. The United States Navy was aware that one of their decorated heroes was being harassed by civilian administrators and parents. Janet Wheeler cleared her throat nervously. Commander Mitchell, I want to assure you that Miss Martinez is a valued member of our educational team. Any discussions we're having are purely administrative in nature. Glad to hear it, Commander Mitchell replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Because I'd hate to think that a Navy Cross recipient was being discriminated against because of her service-related tattoos. That would be the kind of story that tends to attract media attention. Mrs. Morrison looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The threats and complaints that had seemed so important an hour ago suddenly appeared petty and vindictive in the face of actual military concerns. Miss Martinez, Commander Mitchell continued, I need to brief you on the security protocols. Can we speak privately? Of course, Sarah replied, standing up with relief. If there's nothing else urgent for this meeting. Superintendent Collins stood up quickly. No. Nothing urgent at all. Miss Martinez, please take all the time you need to address this security matter. We can reconvene later to discuss any remaining administrative issues. As Sarah and Commander Mitchell left the conference room, she could hear the hushed, urgent whispers beginning behind them. The narrative had changed completely. She was no longer a problem teacher with inappropriate tattoos. She was a decorated veteran facing credible security threats because of her service to her country. In the hallway outside the conference room, Commander Mitchell lowered his voice. The threat assessment is real but minimal. We're being cautious because of some chatter we picked up overseas. What I really need to talk to you about is Marcus Thompson. Sarah stopped walking. Marcus? What about Marcus? His father, Staff Sergeant David Thompson, served with one of my units in Afghanistan. Good man, solid operator. He's been asking about you in his communications home. Apparently his son has mentioned a teacher who understands military families. Sarah felt a wave of unexpected emotion. David Thompson is Marcus's father. I knew the name was familiar, but... You served in adjacent areas of operation for about 6 months in 2020. David remembers you. He wanted me to check on his son, make sure he's handling the deployment stress okay. When I started asking around about you, I heard about the situation here at the school. They walked outside into the crisp morning air, away from any potential eavesdroppers. Commander Mitchell's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more personal and less official. Sarah, can I speak frankly? He asked, using her first name for the first time. Yes, sir. Your service record speaks for itself. Navy Cross, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. 3 successful deployments, 8 confirmed enemy KIA, 17 successful extractions under fire. You're a goddamn American hero, and these people are giving you grief about honoring your fallen teammates? Sarah smiled wryly. Civilian life is different, sir. People here don't understand what we've been through. They see the tattoos and make assumptions about my character without knowing anything about my service. That's bullshit, and you know it, Commander Mitchell said bluntly. You've earned the right to hold your head high anywhere you go. These people should be thanking you, not questioning you. With respect, sir, I'm not looking for thanks. I just want to do my job and be left alone. Commander Mitchell studied her carefully. Is that really what you want, Sarah? To hide who you are, to pretend your service doesn't matter? Because I can tell you right now, that kid Marcus needs someone like you in his life. His father is worried sick about him, and from what I understand, you're the first adult who's been able to get through to him. Sarah thought about Marcus, about the relief in his eyes when he realized she understood his fears. She thought about the other military children in her classes, the ones who struggled with deployments and relocations and the unique pressures of military life. "The school board wants me to keep quiet about my background," she said quietly. "They're worried about parents complaining, about maintaining appropriate professional standards." "Screw the school board," Commander Mitchell said with military directness. "You know what's not appropriate? Letting ignorant civilians dictate how a decorated veteran honors her service. You know what's not professional? Allowing these people to diminish your accomplishments because they make them uncomfortable." Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Marcus Thompson. The young man was running across the parking lot, his backpack bouncing against his shoulder and his face flushed with excitement. "Miss Martinez!" Marcus called out, then stopped abruptly when he noticed Commander Mitchell. The teenager immediately recognized the bearing and presence of a senior military officer, and his entire demeanor shifted to respectful attention. "Marcus, this is Commander Mitchell," Sarah said, understanding immediately why the boy was so excited. "Commander, this is Marcus Thompson, Staff Sergeant Thompson's son." Commander Mitchell stepped forward and extended his hand to Marcus. "It's an honor to meet you, son. Your father speaks very highly of you in his letters home." Marcus shook the commander's hand with barely controlled excitement. "You know my dad? How is he? Is he okay?" "He's doing well, Marcus. He's serving with distinction, and he's counting the days until he can come home to you. He wanted me to tell you how proud he is of the way you're handling things here." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, but they were tears of relief and pride rather than worry. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for telling me." Commander Mitchell glanced at Sarah, then back at Marcus. "Your father also wanted me to thank Miss Martinez for taking such good care of you. He said you mentioned a teacher who really understands military families." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Miss Martinez is amazing. She gets it, you know. She understands what it's like when your dad is deployed, what it's like to worry and wait. She's helped me more than anyone else at this school." "That's because Miss Martinez is a genuine American hero," Commander Mitchell said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who knew heroes when he saw them. "She's earned more military honors than most people will ever dream of, and she's using her experience to help young people like you. You're lucky to have her as a teacher." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion as she watched Marcus's face light up with understanding and pride. This was why she had become a teacher, why she had chosen to work with young people despite the challenges. This moment, this connection, this ability to help a military child feel understood and supported. "Miss Martinez," Marcus said quietly, "I was coming to tell you that my friends want to know more about Veterans Day, about what it really means to serve. They've been asking me questions because they know my dad is deployed, but I don't always know how to answer them." Sarah looked at Commander Mitchell, then back at Marcus. For 2 years, she had been hiding her knowledge and experience, allowing these students to learn about military service from textbooks and documentaries instead of from someone who had lived it. Suddenly, that seemed like a betrayal of everything she had fought for. "What kind of questions are they asking?" Sarah asked. "Real questions," Marcus replied earnestly. "Like, what's it really like over there? What do soldiers think about when they're in danger? How do you deal with being scared? What does courage really mean? They want to understand, Miss Martinez. They want to learn from someone who's actually been there." Commander Mitchell smiled approvingly. "Sounds like you have some students who are ready for real education about military service, Sarah, the kind of education that can only come from someone who's lived it." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight control she had maintained over her identity for 2 years. These students deserved better than sanitized textbook versions of military service. They deserved to learn from someone who understood the real cost of freedom, someone who could speak with authority about sacrifice and courage and the bonds that form between people who risk everything for each other. "Marcus," Sarah said with growing determination. Tell your friends that tomorrow we're going to have a very different kind of Veterans Day lesson. Tell them to come prepared with real questions because they're going to get real answers. Commander Mitchell nodded approvingly. Now that sounds like the Sarah Martinez I've heard so much about, the warrior who never backs down from a mission. As the bell rang, signaling the beginning of first period, Sarah realized that she had spent 2 years fighting the wrong battle. She had been so focused on avoiding conflict with narrow-minded parents and administrators that she had forgotten her real mission, educating and inspiring the next generation. Tomorrow, she would remember what it meant to be a warrior, both in and out of uniform. The meeting with the school administration could wait. Her students needed her now, and for the first time in 2 years, Sarah was ready to answer that call with the full weight of her experience and authority behind her. The next morning, Sarah Martinez stood in front of her bathroom mirror and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of her usual long-sleeved blouse, she pulled on a crisp white button-down shirt with sleeves that she rolled up to just below her elbows. For the first time in 2 years, her tattoo was clearly visible, and she wasn't going to hide it anymore. Word had spread quickly through Jefferson High School that something special was happening in Miss Martinez's third-period American history class. Students who weren't even enrolled in the course had found excuses to linger in the hallways, and Marcus Thompson had barely slept with excitement about the real Veterans Day lesson his teacher had promised. As Sarah walked through the halls toward her classroom, she noticed the stares and whispers that followed her exposed tattoo. But something was different today. Instead of judgment and disapproval, she saw curiosity, respect, and even awe from students who had clearly heard rumors about their teacher's military background. Principal Davidson intercepted her near the main office, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. "Sarah, I heard about yesterday's incident with the Navy commander. Are you okay? And—" he glanced pointedly at her exposed forearm. "Are you sure this is wise given our ongoing discussions with parents?" Sarah stopped and faced him directly, her bearing unconsciously shifting to the confident posture she had carried as a military officer. "Principal Davidson, I've spent 2 years hiding who I am to make other people comfortable. I'm done with that. These students deserve to learn about military service from someone who's actually served, and I'm going to give them that education." Before Principal Davidson could respond, Commander Mitchell appeared in the hallway, still in civilian clothes, but carrying himself with unmistakable military authority. "Principal Davidson, I hope you don't mind my staying to observe Miss Martinez's class today. The Navy has a vested interest in how our veterans transition to civilian careers, particularly in education." The implication was clear. The United States Navy was watching how Jefferson High School treated one of their decorated heroes. Principal Davidson swallowed nervously and nodded. "Of course, Commander. We're always happy to have military personnel observe our veterans' education programs." Sarah's third-period classroom was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread so effectively that students from other classes had convinced their teachers to let them attend this special presentation. Marcus Thompson sat in the front row, his eyes bright with anticipation. Behind him, Sarah recognized faces from her other classes, students she had taught for 2 years who were finally going to learn who their teacher really was. Jake Morrison, the student who had mocked Marcus and insulted Sarah's tattoo, sat slouched in the back corner. His mother had undoubtedly heard about yesterday's developments, and his confident smirk had been replaced by uncertain curiosity. "Good morning," Sarah began, standing at the front of the classroom with her tattoo clearly visible to everyone present. "Today we're going to talk about Veterans Day, but not the sanitized version you'll find in most textbooks. Today you're going to learn what military service actually means from someone who's lived it." She gestured to her forearm, where the intricate tattoo drew every eye in the room. "This tattoo tells a story. It's not decoration, and it's not a fashion statement. It's a memorial to 8 of the finest people I've ever known. People who died serving their country in Afghanistan between 2019 and 2021. A profound silence settled over the classroom. Even the students who had just come to satisfy their curiosity understood they were witnessing something significant. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm a former Navy SEAL. I served 3 combat deployments with SEAL Team 3, earning a Navy Cross, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. I'm telling you this not to brag or to shock you, but because you deserve to understand what real military service looks like. Marcus Thompson's hand shot up immediately. Miss Martinez, what's a Navy Cross? Sarah smiled at the genuine curiosity in his voice. The Navy Cross is the second highest military decoration for valor in combat. It's awarded for extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy action. I received mine for leading a rescue operation that saved 12 captured Afghan allies and 2 American contractors who were being held by Taliban forces. Another hand went up. Were you scared? Asked Jennifer Walsh, a quiet sophomore who had never spoken in class before. Terrified, Sarah answered honestly. Anyone who tells you they weren't afraid in combat is either lying or dangerous. Fear keeps you alive. Fear makes you careful, makes you think, makes you respect the gravity of what you're doing. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. The questions came rapidly after that. Students wanted to know about training, about the physical demands, about what it was like to be a woman in such an elite unit. Sarah answered each question with honesty and respect for their genuine desire to understand. Miss Martinez, called out David Chen, one of her brightest students, why did you leave the military? Why become a teacher? Sarah's expression grew more serious. I was medically discharged after sustaining injuries in an IED explosion. But honestly, even if I had been physically able to continue serving, I think I would have eventually chosen to leave. After losing so many teammates, after seeing so much death and destruction, I wanted to do something that built people up instead of tearing them down. I wanted to serve in a different way. Is that why you have their names tattooed on your arm? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah nodded, her voice thick with emotion. Every name you see here represents someone who believed in something bigger than themselves. They believed in protecting innocent people, in defending freedom, in the idea that some things are worth dying for. I carry them with me always, and I try to live in a way that honors their sacrifice. The classroom was completely silent now. Even Jake Morrison was leaning forward, his earlier hostility replaced by something approaching respect. Miss Martinez, a voice called from the back. Is it true that you're some kind of target now? Because of what you did in the military? Sarah glanced at Commander Mitchell, who nodded slightly. There are people in the world who hate American military personnel because we represent freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Sometimes that hatred extends to former military members living civilian lives. It's a risk we accept because we believe in what we fought for. A hand shot up from the middle of the room. That's not fair, protested Maria Santos, a junior whose brother was considering military service. You served your country, you were wounded in combat, and now you have to worry about being attacked by terrorists just for teaching high school? Life isn't always fair, Sarah replied gently. But here's what I want you to understand. We don't serve for fairness or gratitude or recognition. We serve because some things are more important than our own safety or comfort. We serve because freedom isn't free, and someone has to be willing to pay the price. Suddenly, the classroom door opened and Principal Davidson entered, followed by Superintendent Collins and the same group of parents who had been so vocal about Sarah's inappropriateness. Mrs. Morrison's face was pale as she took in the scene, a classroom full of completely engaged students listening to a decorated war hero teach them about genuine American values. Commander Mitchell stood up from his observation position and addressed the room formally. Students, faculty, and community members, I want you to understand something important. Miss Martinez represents the very best of American military service. Her record of valor and sacrifice is virtually unprecedented for someone her age and rank. He walked to the front of the classroom and stood beside Sarah. The tattoo that some people have criticized is actually a sacred memorial to fallen heroes. In military culture, we call this honoring the fallen. It's one of our most sacred duties, and Miss Martinez has chosen to carry out that duty in a visible, permanent way that demonstrates her unwavering commitment to her teammates' memory. Mrs. Morrison shifted uncomfortably as Commander Mitchell continued. Furthermore, Miss Martinez's transition to education represents the highest form of continued service. She's using the leadership skills, the moral courage, and the deep understanding of sacrifice that she developed in combat to educate and inspire the next generation of Americans. Jake Morrison slowly raised his hand, his voice uncertain but genuine. Commander Miss Martinez, I owe you an apology. I said some things about your tattoo, about your service, without understanding what they meant. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Sarah looked at the young man who had mocked her just days earlier and saw something different in his eyes. Apology accepted, Jake, but more importantly, I hope you understand now why it's important to think before you judge people. You never know what someone has been through or what they've sacrificed. Marcus Thompson stood up, his voice clear and strong. Miss Martinez, my dad is deployed right now, and sometimes I get scared and angry about it. People at this school don't understand what that's like, but you do. You understand because you've been there, because you've lost people you cared about. Thank you for helping me understand that his service matters, that it means something important. The emotion in Marcus's voice spread through the room, and Sarah saw tears in several students' eyes. These young people were finally understanding what military service really meant, not just the sanitized version they saw in movies or read in textbooks, but the real cost in human terms. Commander Mitchell reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wooden case. Miss Martinez, on behalf of the United States Navy and Naval Special Warfare Command, I want to present you with something. He opened the case to reveal a commemorative coin, gleaming gold with the sealed trident prominently displayed. This is a Command Challenge coin, personally signed by the Admiral in charge of Naval Special Warfare. It's given only to SEAL operators who have distinguished themselves through extraordinary service and who continue to represent the SEAL ethos in their civilian lives. Sarah felt her breath catch as Commander Mitchell placed the coin in her hands. The inscription reads, "For continuing to serve with honor, courage, and commitment." Miss Martinez, you have never stopped being a SEAL. You've simply changed your area of operations. The students broke into spontaneous applause, and Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. For 2 years, she had felt like she was hiding her true self, ashamed of who she had been and uncertain about who she was becoming. Now, surrounded by students who looked at her with newfound respect and admiration, she finally understood that she hadn't stopped serving. She had simply found a new way to honor her oath. Mrs. Morrison stepped forward hesitantly. Miss Martinez, I owe you a profound apology. I made assumptions about your character based on ignorance and prejudice. I had no idea about your service record, your sacrifices, or the meaning behind your tattoo. I was wrong to criticize you, and I'm ashamed of my behavior. Sarah looked at the woman who had caused her so much stress and anxiety. Mrs. Morrison, I accept your apology, but I want you to understand something important. I'm not the only veteran in this community who has been judged unfairly because of visible reminders of their service. Military service changes people in ways that civilians often don't understand. We need to do better as a community to support and honor our veterans, not just on Veterans Day, but every day. Superintendent Collins cleared his throat, clearly struggling with the dramatic reversal in circumstances. Miss Martinez, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the school district for any distress we may have caused you. Your service record speaks for itself, and we should have been supporting you rather than questioning you. Furthermore, he continued, I'd like to discuss the possibility of you developing a specialized curriculum about military service and veterans' experiences. We have several military families in our district, and their children would benefit enormously from having an educator who truly understands their unique challenges and perspectives. Sarah felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of creating something meaningful, something that could help not just Marcus, but all the military children who struggled with deployment stress, frequent moves, and the unique pressures of military family life. I'd be honored to develop such a curriculum, Sarah replied. Military children face challenges that civilian educators often don't recognize or understand. They need advocates who can speak their language and understand their world. Commander Mitchell nodded approvingly. The Navy would be happy to provide support for such a program. We have resources for educators who are working with military families, and we're always looking for ways to better support our personnel and their children. As the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus Thompson approached Sarah with something approaching awe on his face. Miss Martinez, my dad is going to be so proud when I tell him about today. He always said that the best military leaders are the ones who continue serving even after they take off the uniform. Sarah put her hand on Marcus's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility and privilege that came with being trusted by this young man. Your father is absolutely right, Marcus. Service isn't a job. It's a calling. And that calling doesn't end when you leave the military, it just takes different forms. As the classroom slowly emptied, Sarah stood alone for a moment, looking at her exposed tattoo in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. The names of her fallen teammates seemed to glow in the light, reminding her of the promise she had made to live with honor and purpose. For 2 years, she had been hiding this memorial, ashamed of the story it told and afraid of how people would judge her for carrying these names on her skin. Now she understood that hiding this tattoo had been a betrayal not just of herself, but of the 8 heroes whose memory it preserved. Commander Mitchell approached her as she gathered her lesson plans. Sarah, I want you to know that what you did here today was every bit as important as anything you accomplished in Afghanistan. You took a room full of young Americans who had only abstract ideas about military service and gave them real understanding, real appreciation for the sacrifices that keep them free. Thank you, sir. But honestly, I should have done this 2 years ago. These kids deserve to know who their teacher really was. Maybe, Commander Mitchell replied, but sometimes we need to go through the darkness before we can appreciate the light. You've been through your own kind of deployment here, facing different enemies but fighting for the same values you defended overseas. Today, you completed that mission. As Sarah walked through the hallways of Jefferson High School that afternoon, she noticed that everything had changed. Students nodded respectfully when they saw her, teachers looked at her with new admiration, and even the maintenance staff seemed to stand a little taller in her presence. But the most important change was internal. For the first time since leaving the military, Sarah felt like herself again. She was no longer hiding behind carefully constructed walls, no longer apologizing for who she was or what she had done. She was Sarah Martinez, former Navy SEAL, combat veteran, and educator. She was a warrior who had simply changed battlefields. That evening, Sarah received a phone call from Staff Sergeant David Thompson, calling from his deployment in Afghanistan. Marcus had apparently emailed his father immediately after school to tell him about the extraordinary day they had shared. Miss Martinez, Staff Sergeant Thompson's voice came through clearly despite the distance. I can't thank you enough for taking care of my son. Marcus sounds like a different kid, confident, proud, hopeful. He told me about your service record, about the lesson you gave today. Ma'am, you're exactly the kind of person I hoped would be looking out for him while I'm gone. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears as she listened to this deployed father expressing gratitude for her care of his son. Sergeant Thompson, Marcus is an exceptional young man. He's handling your deployment with courage and maturity that would make any parent proud. You're raising a future leader. Thank you, ma'am. And Miss Martinez, welcome home. The simple phrase carried a weight of meaning that only military personnel could fully understand. Welcome home, not just from deployment, but from the isolation and confusion of trying to find purpose in civilian life. Welcome home to a community that finally understood and appreciated her service. As Sarah hung up the phone, she looked at her reflection in the darkened window of her apartment. Her tattoo was clearly visible, the names and symbols that had been hidden for so long now permanently part of how she presented herself to the world. She thought about the 8 teammates whose names decorated her forearm, wondering what they would think about her journey from hiding in shame to standing proud. She knew they would be proud of her for finally claiming her place as both a warrior and an educator, for using her experience to serve a new generation of Americans. Tomorrow, Sarah would begin developing the military family curriculum that Superintendent Collins had requested. She would create resources and programs that would help military children across the district feel understood and supported. She would use her platform as an educator to ensure that the sacrifices made by military families were recognized and honored. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Sarah Martinez slept peacefully. She was no longer hiding from who she was. She was no longer ashamed of her service or apologetic about her scars. She was a Navy SEAL who had found a new way to serve, a warrior who had discovered that the classroom could be just as important a battlefield as any foreign shore. The tattoo that had once been a source of shame and secrecy was now a badge of honor, visible proof that heroes walk among us in the most unexpected places. And in a small suburban high school in Millbrook, students would never again take for granted the freedom they enjoyed or the people who had sacrificed to preserve it. Sarah Martinez had finally come home.